Welcome to the Wake Up Show. This is a special show that we're doing, today, tomorrow. We did it yesterday. For our special 3-day broadcast, The Earth Deserves More Than a Day. Environmental justice is the topic, and Earth Day is actually tomorrow, the 22nd, but we decided that we would take 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So joining me will be Aurora Martin from Pop-Up Justice. Daniel, just let me know when Aurora comes in. And if Aurora is in now, then let's bring Aurora in. Hey Aurora.
Tony. How are you? Good. How are you? Glad to be back, and thank you.
All right. Under the circumstances, I'm fantastic. We're going to go over today's Earth Day programming for sure. Yesterday was an incredible day. I want to recap that. But as we're getting people to wake up and be prepared for today's discussions, I want to talk a little bit about, yesterday's guilty verdict for Derek Chauvin. Aurora, for you, what was the feeling that you had, if any,
yes.
Yesterday?
Well, I'm so glad that we have some space and time to talk about it, because it was in mixed emotions, because just moments afterwards, of course, we learn about the murder of Ma'Khia Bryant, and of course, recently, Daunte Wright. But as I was listening today, and just kind of listening to the news and listening to different reflections about the guilty verdict, I do want to say, on behalf of the different organizations that I'm working with through Social Justice Film Institute and Front and Center, and of course Pop-Up Justice, that we want to lift our hearts for the justice for George Floyd, and yet we want to make sure that we're demanding more justice. I thought that this morning, when I was listening on my way to the studio, that the words of poet Kwame Alexander on his reflections on the guilty verdict was totally appropriate to actually at least quote in part. And that he says, "This country is a house, this world a village. If we are to become a civil community, let us come in unity. Rise up out of the blue, rise up into the light, rise up out of the water, rise up into the sun, rise up through the love, rise up, reach for freedom, and know you are good enough to end the rage, to turn the page, to stand up with pride, to stand up with peace, to lift your voice, to open your eyes, and to rise." And when I listened to him today, I really just felt that it was the morning reflection that I needed to get through the day.
Well, this certainly impacted worldwide, and in listening, I know how I felt. Initially, was a sense of relief. It wasn't joy. It wasn't exhilarating. It was a sense of relief. And then as I watched again some of the pundits on television share their thoughts, that brought a different perspective. But then it was just also listening to people in the community and what they thought and how they felt. And, I know there are a number of different feelings out there about this, and we're certainly going to provide space for our community to share their thoughts as well as this continues to unfold and what it looks like and what it means. And certainly, yes, the fact that the very same day, slightly before, there was another killing by police has an impact, but it's a lot more than that, justice. And we're talking about environmental justice today, and what that looks like and what that means. Was justice served? And a big thing has to be that it took all of this.
Mm-hmm.
It took undeniable footage that was fortunately captured. It took protests. It took the world watching And then afterwards, when the guilty verdict came in, I'm not saying that people aren't entitled to due process. That is the way that this country works, and everybody gets a trial. Everybody gets to defend themselves. But it took so much to get this guilty verdict
Mm-hmm.
in this country under these circumstances today. And it made me think about how many times when folks say, well, that's the way the court system works and justice was served. Well, if you're black, you remember something called vigilante justice, white mobs
Mm-hmm.
that took justice into their own hands. It reminds you of Emmett Till.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, White mobs who took justice into their own hands if they felt like that's what justice required. It reminds you, as we approach the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre, which they called Tulsa riots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a riot, it was a massacre. And it is still not a big part of our history that is taught, where it was the same situation. And I'm not sure of the young man's name. I think it was Dick, and I don't remember the last name. But he was arrested in Tulsa for doing something inappropriate to a white female elevator operator, which turned out to be false and was later acquitted for. But when he was arrested, the citizens of Tulsa decided that they wanted vigilante justice. Now, black folks knew what this meant. That meant that they were going to go to the jail and lynch him. So the black community, many of whom were World War I veterans, tried to come to his defense, to the courthouse. Well, they were, of course, were overpowered by the white mob. And the white mob burned down an entire neighborhood.
Mm.
An entire neighborhood that was a thriving black community for their justice.
Mm-hmm.
So just a lot to think about. But I knew that we could not go today without sharing some thoughts about Derek Chauvin and what we're talking about today, which is Earth Day and specifically environmental justice. So, Aurora, I also want to thank Christian Lopez Marino, the general manager for KQWZ, and KQWZ broadcasting our Earth Day events to our FM audience in the SeaTac area in Kent and White Center. Welcome to all of you who are listening, and got some great feedback about yesterday's shows. So let's really quickly, Aurora, just kind of recap before we get into today. And we want to make sure that we have enough time for today to talk about what's coming up. We have some great stuff coming up today, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yesterday, I thought one of the things that I really enjoyed, Aurora, was just finding out the differences in the way cultures treat the earth and the relationship in particular with our native community members and their historical background on how they see the relationship with the earth as a mutual relationship as opposed to man dominating the earth. All things live together. Everything works together, and you have to create an ecosystem where there is balance. That's just something that I got out of yesterday. But give me a recap of yesterday for you. I know we had a number of and great job, by the way, moderating your panel discussion.
Oh my goodness. My voice was a bit off, but I really appreciate the opportunity and your generosity in giving me that feedback and encouragement. But yes, there was so much that we got to talk about yesterday, and really appreciate the fact that you've really just allowed us to talk about broadly what environmental justice is, how it shows up, how it feels, and the fact that, as we started this conversation or this segment on really acknowledging and taking a moment about justice for George Floyd, what I took from it in my conversation with tribal chair of the Chinook tribe, Tony Johnson, and longtime environmental justice Duwamish, super fund manager and leader James Rasmussen, was intersectionality and the necessity of the collective movements so that environmental justice really is very much about racial justice, and that our identities, as well as this notion of American justice, what is it as it relates to us individually as BIPOC, it all came together. I mean, certainly the issues of climate change and the issues of pollution, and all of that, we definitely were able to touch on that. And also some celebratory moments with regard to a kind of, you know, retrospective of some legislative wins as we're in this last week. But something that Tribal Chair Chinook, Tribal Chair, that is Tony Johnson, and James Rasmussen of the Duwamish had said was about the sort of the legality of things. And it made me think a lot about how laws and policies in this country have historically really shaped who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that hasn't been a great experience. And so it's sort of created this trajectory of difficulty. And so I think that on a very broad level is something that just has been sitting with me, and I think will be for a long time, because the struggles and the movements need to come together.
All right. Once again, welcome to the Wake Up Show for Earth Day, our 3-day summit on Earth Day. Earth Day again is Thursday, tomorrow, the 22nd. But we decided, hey, you know what? Aurora and I started talking, and we just decided let's do it big. You dig? And we're doing it for 3 days. Yesterday was exceptional. You will be able to go back and review on both YouTube as well as Facebook if you missed those panel discussions, those stories. You can go back and check them out, and we'll also air them over our streaming broadcast as well. But we've got today is I mean, wow! How do you top yesterday? You know,
There's more. There's more, Tony.
that's the best way to say it. Is that there is more coming up today, and so let's get into it right after we're done with our wake up show. Aurora, we've got a broadcast coming up about transportation.
Yes,
and let's talk about that. Transportation is more than $1 billion traffic jam. It's about the future of equity, access, and environmental justice. Let's talk about that.
Yes, we actually had a community briefing, the Front and Centered organization of various coalition members, together with Disability Rights Washington. And we talked about this transportation package that is currently in the legislature right now, trying to figure out, many legislators, as well as the governor, as well as different community members, are trying to imagine what is going to be workable. And that is certainly tied up with a number of other key pieces of legislation, because when we think about transportation, we think about roads and freeways and things like that. But really on a higher level, I think what this next segment at 12 is going to touch on is really transportation is about people and planet. And when we think about that, and when we think about the pollution that is generated and the carbon, we have to also take a step back and think about, what about transportation for community people who don't have access as easily as somebody perhaps like myself, who, can drive my son or my daughter to school, drive down the way 25 miles out to work or something. But we're actually talking about public transportation as well, and accessibility for people with disabilities. And so there are a number of issues that this particular segment is going to touch on, and it's going to try and also push people to think about transportation in a different way, rather than just coming up with more roads and more freeways.
All right. Aurora, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, I think we thought we lost you for a second. Again, that's transportation is more than $1 billion traffic jam. That's coming up right after the wake up show. And then I know that you're excited about this one. Food justice, food for thought, coming up at 1 o'clock.
Yes, yes. I'll be speaking to three of my sisters in food justice, one of whom I think you know, Naima Clark.
Yes.
Naima Clark is actually, she calls herself a farm queen. And we've also got a
That's
fun,
what I was trying to remember the nickname, the farm queen.
she, it is so, she's such a wonderful, beautiful, and just totally creative person as well, and really happy to let people know that we'll be sharing her documentary. It's a documentary short about her journey on becoming the farm queen, and I think her story and her perspective on what is food justice. We're putting two words together about food. For me, I'm eating too much food, and what does that mean about justice? Putting that together with food justice, and she has a really beautiful way of telling her story as to why it is that when she has now become a farm queen in South Seattle, why does that mean food justice to her? And I think that story that she shares both on air as well as in her documentary will be a great contrast to the stories of food justice that Rosalinda Guillen, for example, up in Northwest Washington, in Skagit and Whatcom counties, will be able to share about what food justice means to her and the farm workers that she works with all across the state. And also, in many ways, she works all across the nation and world as well, with a number of different people who are working and thinking about food systems. Those who harvest and cultivate our food are really talking about the desire to harvest justice as well. And then her story, those two stories will then be in contrast as well with the local story of a local leader, Susan Balbus, a Native American woman who heads up Na'a'ilihi Fund, 100% Indigenous women organization looking at, among other things, food sovereignty. And so I think her story and her notion of food justice will also be a little different, but very complementary to Rosalinda's and Naima's stories of food justice, in that she's going to be able to talk about what Na'a'ilihi and she are doing with regard to food justice and food sovereignty, and working with different Native American groups on how to connect, as you were saying earlier, how to connect and cultivate and learn from the various customs from tribes, and her even personal experience of actually cultivating your own food. And so, in terms of food as well as medicine and other ways in which I think the different farms, for example, that she has been able to consult with will actually be much deeper than how many people like myself think about, food as in fruits and vegetables. It's much more complex and much deeper than that. So that's going to be a very exciting and delicious conversation, shall we say.
Food justice, food for thought. And then at 4 o'clock today, from here to there, environmental justice film shorts. We're going to show some film shorts.
That's the one that picks up right after, I think, well, not right after, but I think those three films plus a new one, After Earth, will be definitely complementary to the conversation that Rosalinda and Susan and Naima and I will be having, and that there'll be films that actually feature Naima's work at Nurturing Roots, and Community is the organization that Rosalinda works with. And then also there's a film about Na'a'ilihi. And then I thought it would be a wonderful complement to that set by including this beautiful Asian Pacific Islander kind of immersive film, where it features four API women all around the world talking about the impact of climate change on them and their island countries and customs. So that's not to be missed.
And we are going to have a phenomenal celebration of Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month right here on Rainier Avenue Radio all month long for the month of May. Opportunity to find out pioneers, leaders, hear stories, etc. Just had to throw that in there as well. And then we've got a special also at 4:30.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
yeah, at 4:30. Let's talk about 4:30 and
4:30.
environmental justice behind the lens and on film.
The making of Mossville.
Mossville.
I'm trying to get my voice as low as yours, Tony, but I mean, because you know why this film is also another phenomenal film. It was if it were rainy outside, I think we might even get more people to come in and watch this amazing film. But this discussion is a precursor. It's just a half-hour discussion between Social Justice Film Institute advisor Rimoy Phillips, who's out in Brooklyn. His film Hurdle was a Gold Prize award-winning documentary film in 2019, I believe. An amazing film about a Palestinian parkour group, if you can believe. I mean, it was great music too, actually. I was looking for their kind of soundtrack. But anyway, he is going to be interviewing the filmmaker of Mossville about how it is that it matters who is behind the lens in telling these stories and bearing witness on this kind of digital documentary level. And when people get a chance to see Mossville, because it hasn't necessarily been as it was released in 2019, but it's not necessarily a story that everybody knows. Again, all week we're hearing about stories that not everybody knows, and Mossville must be a story that people seek out and understand, because it really kind of typifies the story of how laws, policies, and the different movements need to kind of come together. And it's like what you said earlier about the story of Tulsa, for example, but it is a modern story of environmental injustice and serious tragedy in Louisiana.
Earth deserves more than a day. We are at day 2 of our 3-day summit on Earth Day, environmental justice conversations, stories, films. This is the Wake Up Show. It's 11:30, so if you were hopefully you were already awakened. And but it's just a way to give you a head start on the day's activities. So again, at noon, transportation is more than $1 billion traffic jam. At 1 o'clock, food justice, food for thought. At 4 p.m., from here to there, environmental justice film shorts, and at 4:30, environmental justice behind the lens and on film. There'll be that conversation with the I believe it's the director of making of Mossville.
Yes.
Director. And then you'll also get a link where just for today, you'll be able to watch that film as well. Well, Aurora, we'll be back again tomorrow at 11:30 to recap today's events and then talk about what we've got coming up tomorrow as well. But I do want to say, I want to remind everyone that on Friday from 1 to 3, we're going to have a discussion on how to run for office. So the events that you've seen unfold over the last year, culminating in Derek Chauvin being found guilty. And again, to that extent, I like the word accountability at the very least was put in place for his actions. We'll see what happens during the sentencing. But if you want to run for office, if you want to be one of the individuals who has the authority to make change within this system, again, that's why we elect officials. On Friday, we'll have the Seattle Elections and Ethics Commission here. We'll also have King County elections here. We'll have candidates who are running for office for the first time to tell you what that's like and what you can expect. We'll have a deeper explanation of democracy vouchers and how they can help you run for office if that's what you'd like to do. We'll have candidates who are already elected to office to be here. All of this is to let you know that you can run for office. You can do this if that's what you want to do. During these times that we're in right now, if you feel that you are not collected to the sphere of influence and you would like your issues and your concerns to be part of the electoral process, run for office. That's tomorrow at 1. There's a registration. You can go to the website so that you can participate on Zoom. Of course, you can listen through our regular audio streaming channels as well as YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. So we're going to get to it right now. It's about time. We've got 1 minute left. Aurora, thanks for hopping on the Wake Up Show again.
Yes, thank you. And I'll see you back at 1.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.